Matthew here from MiniWargaming.com, and it's time for another Sit and Talk. This is the Ask Me Anything show, where you ask me anything about wargaming, business, or sometimes gets personal, like politics and religion. So if you get easily offended by those topics, especially politics and religion, then you can not watch this show, and that'll probably be better for both you and for a lot of other people too. Otherwise, just carry on. If you want your question or comment answered, make sure you leave it in the comment section below. But unless you're watching this on YouTube, in which case click the link in the video description below to go to our website and leave it there, because that's where I read the comments from, just because it's easier to organize. While you're there, thumb up any questions that you want me to answer, because I answer the top 10 thumbed up questions, unless I don't want to. And then I answer random questions after that, because I never get through all the questions, because there's always far too many. For example, today there were 19 pages of questions, and I'm lucky to get through 5 to 10 of that many. Let's go into this. Mexican DPS. If Steve is in the office at the time you get this comment, can you have him read it out loud? If not, then please read it out loud yourself. Steve?
Yes, sir.
Can you come and read this comment? And just right there.
Steve is love, Steve is life. Oh yeah, testify.
Yeah, yeah. Steve is love, Steve is life. That is all. Somehow that got 60 thumb ups.
Only 60?
It was the #1 comment. So everybody agrees, Steve is love, Steve is life. But I think you got to do it with like a soul voice. Steve is love, Steve is life. BPAR, hey Matt, you should be in the show Undercover Boss. I know that show, that's kind of funny. Where the boss goes undercover at their company. I'm sure nobody would recognize you in a non-mini wargaming t-shirt. That would be kind of funny. Yuki, and somehow that got a lot of thumbs up. It's like, this is what you guys want me to read on my sit and talks? Okay. Yuki, V13. Hey Matt, on the topic of stealing the initiative, when playing at home we have a house rule. If you attempt to steal the initiative and fail, then the opponent can then choose whether it's night fighting or not. This is a way that won't neuter either rule, but give a slight tactical advantage. That's interesting. That's a nice, simple way of doing something that might be in the game anyway. That just allows you to be like, you can steal. Now, some armies, like if it's a Tau opponent, they're like, oh, I don't care, make it night fighting. Or, yeah, maybe they won't want to steal because they want it to be night fighting. So do you make it so that the person who chooses to steal, if they don't steal, they get to choose if it's night fighting? So that could be interesting. They get to choose night fighting, or they can choose to try to steal the initiative, in which case the other person gets to choose night fighting. P.S. If you do ever come to England and come to Nottingham, where I live, to visit Warhammer World, then please make sure you tell us so I can come meet you guys and have some games. P.P.S. Who of the staff does the best zombie impression? Vaultman for life, Yuki. Well, it's interesting to say that because we are actually planning a trip to the UK this summer. Now, it's not going to be a long trip, so I don't know how many stops we can make and how many people we can meet, but we are planning that. So just wanted you to know that. We don't have firm dates yet or an itinerary yet. It's going to be part business, part pleasure, so we'll just kind of see what happens there. But I won't be there long enough to be able to do like a tour of the UK and visit lots of gaming clubs and do lots of battle reports and all of that. So we'll definitely do some videos, but not as many as we'd like. Stegadeth, hey Matt, thanks for the wonderful content you guys provide. You're welcome. A few questions from a fellow Latter-day Saint. Does Dave ever get any negative feedback at church for his facial hair and long flowing locks? I don't think so. Do you ever get negative feedback at church because you have long hair and facial hair?
Oh, no.
No.
They think I'm Jesus.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. He might, I don't know, I think he might get comments, but I don't think they're like negative comments necessarily. It's more like, Dave, you look so suave. Oh, Dave, I love the way your ponytail looks today. Oh, Dave, that goatee is just so wonderful. I think those are the kind of comments that he might get, but not necessarily negative ones. Also, you said last episode that you were 50-50 in the corporation, but does he draw a higher salary? I have to ask because we all know a beard is a symbol of virility and power, so it stands to reason he gets more. A hair conditioner isn't free. Well, I won't discuss compensation here, because I just don't think that we need to. Hey, what's wrong with not having a beard? We had this discussion last week. I can't grow one, even if I tried, all right? So, what are you trying to say, that I have no virility and no power? Finally, you said you all will add more games as finances allow. May I beg for Kings of War for Mantic games? You definitely can beg for it. It's a simple game, but not simplistic, and allows so much faster, and it plays so much faster than Warhammer Fantasy. Thanks for all you do, Vault member, as finances allow. Neo Navy. If Khorne raids a Xenos barroom with a brawling pit, theoretically, Slaanesh would raid an Eldar Exodite disco ball, Nurgle a Tau pharmaceutical, and Tzeentch an Imperial voting poll. Change, right? And thus is the entire story of Rise of the Blood Reaver. Captain Epic. Matt, I have started playing 40k in the past year, starting my Astra Militarum army. My primary enemy is my brother who plays Necrons. Ooh, good luck. When he received his new codex, his army was greatly enhanced by all the formations available to him. I find this saddening as I have no options besides Unbound and Combined Arms attachments. I'm asking if you know what are the best strengths of my codex. In other words, like example, blob squads, mechanized, mixed, or other. Thank you for all the videos and time you take to give us wargamers the best experience ever. P.S. The Emperor protects. The Astra Militarum is kind of not that interesting right now. It doesn't have access to detachments and formations like everybody else does. Like it does, but not really that many. It's an interesting army because it's just the humans. It's just the boring humans, but the boring humans can create the most interesting stories, but it's hard to make an army that is really interesting. Like it's interesting to have genetically enhanced humans, Space Marines, or to have all the aliens and all that. But humans it's hard to really do, and I can see why they were always just kind of... I hope they get an update, and I hope that includes new detachments that allow you to play... like, you know, it could have like a tank company detachment, it could have infantry detachments, it could have all sorts of interesting things that they can do with the Astra Militarum. Just so much variety, because it is such an enormously large army, and much more versatile than like, because the orcs are, there's tons of orcs, tons of Necrons, but Necrons, they're all mechanical, so they kind of follow procedure. Orcs, they're all just kind of very straightforward, so they don't really develop these diverse cultures. But humans, on the other hand, like you look at just the basic troops and how many different models you have access to, Cadians, Catachan, Voistrans, all those different ones, and that's just to represent the same thing. So you can see that there's a lot of potential for the Astra Militarum to really shine in the 40k universe in terms of making them a really interesting army to collect and to play. But right now they seem to be lacking a lot of that, mainly because their codex is getting a little outdated. But there are lots of ways to play them well. They are still a very strong army, and I'm not really getting into the topic of allies, because obviously you can ally them with Inquisition or with Space Marines of some sort, or Imperial Knights to bolster some of their weak areas. But Imperial Guard are definitely not lacking in terms of firepower and versatility just within the Combined Arms attachment. For example, Leman Russes still are very, very solid tanks to bring into the game, just because of the firepower they can lay down. You also have access to some very cheap troop choices that have a versatility in the weapons they can bring, and then also their abilities thanks to the order system. And so if you're playing Maelstrom missions where objectives are really important, then you actually have a good army for that, because you can bring a lot of guys, and you can have a lot of good table control because of that. You're lacking in a lot of areas. Yes, the Necrons are very versatile, or they're very tough and very strong, but you do have the firepower to take on that. You have some really good flyers in terms of Valkyries and Vendettas. They're not the best flyers in the 40k universe in the game right now, but they're still solid. So there are several ways that you can build a good solid list, whether it's a tank company or whether it's infantry heavy. There's just nothing fancy about them. There's no fancy way to build them. There's just more straightforward builds. It used to be the leaf blower list, and now it's just a straightforward build that you kind of need to do. Chimeras full of lots of special weapons and veterans, and then Leman Russes are there to help back them up. You've got access to some really cool tanks, like the Wyverns are probably one of the strongest barrage weapons out there. You get a tank, like a squadron of 3 Wyverns, and I don't care what kind of saves you get as Necrons, they're going to lay down so many wounds because of their ignore, cover, shred, twin linked. So your first blast gets twin linked, and then everything else is just going to smack the heck out of that group of warriors that's sitting there, and you're going to inflict so many wounds that with shred especially, that you're going to be able to force them to roll so many saves. And you kind of have to treat Necrons like Terminators. No pun intended there, because they look like Terminators from Terminator, but like Terminators with 2+ saves, where the way that you beat Terminators is not always just AP2, because you don't usually get a lot of that unless you're Tau, but it's more just putting on a lot of damage to them, so they have to roll a lot, and then every one they roll is something that really is bad. So the same thing with Necrons, just put a lot of wounds into them. Wyverns are really good for that, and you have lots of other things that can do that too. So I think you can do it. Now, if he keeps bringing strong to carrying detachment lists, you might keep having a hard time, but there's nothing you can really do about that. Jorvar123. Matt, we've been seeing some Dark Eldar and battle reports lately, which is great. Variety really spices up the show, and I hope to see a lot more of them. Steve even commented in the Harlequin videos that he might be getting some. Is that true? Steve, is that true?
He's in a meeting.
He's in a meeting. I think it's true. I think he's expressed interest. He hasn't started collecting them yet. I might even be having them in a narrative campaign in the future. I will admit that my mind has changed a little bit. I still don't like the Dark Eldar background. I think it's a little too sadistic and too many things. There's many things that I don't like about them. But then I read the Apocalypse Warzone Valador book. And if you haven't read that, basically it's a story of the Eldar trying to stop two Hive fleets from merging. Hive Fleet Leviathan and Hive Fleet Kraken. Hive Fleet Kraken was sent through the warp by the Eldar to try to get rid of them, and it worked, but then they had to pay the price later on when they came out near the Hive Fleet Leviathan, and so they basically went to the world where the two fleets were meeting, because if they devoured each other and learned each other's strengths, then it would make one very powerful Hive Fleet. And so they went and they enlisted the help through the Harlequins. The Harlequins are kind of the ambassadors between the two races, the whatever you want to call that, emissaries. And they enlisted the help of the Dark Eldar, because the Dark Eldar had the technology to destroy the planet. They had the access to a device. And the Dark Eldar were happy to help for two reasons. One, because the Eldar, in order to activate this device, had to sacrifice a lot of their people because they had to stay on the planet while it was blowing up. And so the Dark Eldar were very happy about that. And the Dark Eldar also wanted to bring back some specimens of the Tyranids to fight in their gladiatorial pits in Camorra. And so it was a really interesting story because it involved the Dark Eldar and their kind of evil nature without involving all that stuff that I really hate about them. And so I read that, and I'm like, okay, I could involve Dark Eldar in a campaign. I just have to kind of stay away from all the stuff that the torturing and other disgusting stuff that they do, and I just focus more on them interacting with the Eldar or some other species like that. So I am thinking of doing a campaign that will be having Eldar or Dark Eldar in there as well. It'll be with Eldar. It won't just be Dark Eldar, and it'll also probably have Harlequins too, and other stuff. But so yeah, so I've kind of come around from that. I still don't like the background of the Dark Eldar. I wish that they toned them down a little bit, a little less Slaanesh. I was even reading. Where was I reading? Was it on a Daka forum post or Bella Blast Souls? It might have been a Bella Blast Souls article where they're talking about getting rid of Slaanesh. And I think it was a Bella Blast Souls article where they talked about getting rid of Slaanesh and how with the new Harlequin Codex it actually alluded to the prophecies of them finding a way to trick Slaanesh and finally defeat it once and for all. And that would be interesting because in the article he basically argues saying we could get rid of Slaanesh out of the 40k universe and it might be good because it's kind of the residual from the 80s of all that, the stuff that makes the game less appealing to people because some people might be fine with all that the sexual stuff basically, but it can keep a lot of other people away from it because it makes them uncomfortable and they don't want to deal with that kind of stuff. They don't want to be playing a game where all of a sudden somebody else looks and they're like, what is that? Or what's in this book of yours? Or what's this picture of? And they get uncomfortable with that. And I agree with that. So, and then they argue that you could get rid of Slaanesh and that maybe even Games Workshop is thinking of it, although I can't speak on that, because they've been doing a lot of updates to the other stuff, but not Slaanesh. And then there's this prophecy of getting rid of it. And I think that'd be interesting, because then it would allow us to kind of throw away that aspect of 40k, which I really don't like, which really is all about Slaanesh. It's all about the depravity and the excess and all that stuff. So it's interesting just to see all that. And if Games Workshop doesn't do it, maybe I'll tie it into a campaign and kill Slaanesh. That'd be interesting. Anyways, I noticed Dave and his opponent elected to not call combat drugs drugs and instead call them pharmaceuticals. I understand why. It's a family-friendly show, and I can appreciate that. So out of curiosity, if I were to come into the studio with, say, Lilith Hesperox, would I be denied the ability to play her due to the fact that her model is scantily clad? Just curious about that. I don't even play Dark Eldar, but they've caught my eye recently as I want my second army to be as different as possible from my main army of Space Wolves, but that's off topic. I can't picture exactly what she looks like. I know like you can get some other models that are a little risque and fantasy as well, some of the Wood Elf stuff and the Dark Elf stuff, which is the Dark Eldar, of course. And I know that, like, for example, when we played the Sisters of Battle in the Utgard Infestation campaign, I basically said no Sisters Repentia and no Penitent engines because I just don't appreciate what those models bring to the game. And obviously people are going to have disagreements. Some other people would be like, why do you feel that way? There's a game that depicts violence and you can't think it depicts this. And I get that. I get that you have a point of view of how you see it, and that's fine. Just ask that you respect my point of view too, and of course that will be the one that would determine what I do in my battle reports. It's all a matter of belief systems and ethics and all that. So we can have discussions about that all day long. And this is where that whole warning at the beginning of the show is: if you get easily offended by this stuff, please don't watch, because I want to be able to have a reasonable conversation about these things. And so would I allow her to be played? Well, I guess if it all depends, because I don't know exactly what she looks like, but a lot of times when you just stick the models on the table and you're far away from them, it doesn't really matter so much. So I don't know. It all depends. One more question. My friend and the owner of my local game store has a burning hatred for, fill in the blank, Space Marine bikes. He doesn't care how good the rules are for his chaos. He just hates them. He thinks they're just so stupid in a setting like 40K, and that they're completely impossible and ridiculous, and yet he's perfectly fine with my guys riding rhinoceros-sized wolves. We just had a discussion with this the other day with my opponent. He's with the Thunderwolf Cavalry, because I just played against Space Wolves. And it's like they're riding wolves, but then we do have Space Marines riding bikes, which I am too. Who wouldn't want to ride a giant wolf into battle, but for some reason the internet hates it? What are your thoughts on the plausibility of Space Marine bikes, and can you help me convince my friend that they're totally awesome and maneuverable and viable in a combat scenario? Thanks. They are not totally awesome and maneuverable and viable in a combat scenario. Otherwise, we would see them used in our army today. We don't use bikes. Bikes are too fragile. They're not good for all-terrain, like dirt bikes maybe, but those are even smaller. And they're just not a good vehicle. That's why we've developed vehicles the way we have, the all-terrain vehicles and the tracked vehicles that we have. Or in the future, a hover vehicle could provide a very similar functionality, being able to obviously stay above any of the terrain. But bikes, no, they don't make any sense. That doesn't matter, though, because this is a game and we're looking for a certain appeal, a certain visual factor. And 40K's never tried to go for realism. That's not their point. They're fantasy in space. That's really the way to boil it down. And that's not me being critical. That's not a critical thing to say. That's just the look they've gone for. And you also have to remember that the game was developed first in like the 80s. And that's why you get a lot of the influences from the 80s in this game. Whereas miniature war games that are created today are going to be influenced by the 2010s. Whatever we call that, the 10s. And so in 30 years from now, people will be like, oh, that looks so dumb, because it's based on 2010's technology, 2010 appeal, aesthetics. Like maybe in 30 years from now, post-apocalyptic won't be all the rage. And when you see post-apocalyptic, it'll be like, oh, that reminds me of the 10s. Seriously, that could actually be what happens, where like zombies and post-apocalyptic is huge right now, and might not be in style anymore in 20 or 30 years. And so, but you, as a gamer who started now, will love the look of those kind of things, whereas people in 20 or 30 years from now will be like, this looks dumb. Why is it like that? Why it should look more like this, whatever the current day thing is. So we got to stop. They're trying to put realism into the game and realize that it's an aesthetic flavor. And in that case, I think Space Marines or Dark Eldar or Eldar, or just that concept of bikes in general, in this, zipping across and firing their weapons and doing everything they can. Now it makes more sense for all the hover bikes, like the Eldar jet bikes and stuff, like that, or like the Tomb Blades, because they're all hover, right? They all stay above the ground. The humans are the only ones that have, after 40,000 years, managed to keep wheels and tracks and not go into hover mode, which is also an aesthetic choice, because it really separates humans from aliens. That all the aliens have access to the hover, and humans just keep their tracked look. So it's an aesthetic choice, is really what it comes down to. Is it realistic? Absolutely not, but I think it's cool. So take the realism out, and you can enjoy it a lot more. Crown Blade. Hello, Matt. Good sir, when you decided to bring back fantasy, it was as if the storms abated and silence settled across the land. Then when you said Ash and Steve would be taking the lead, the skies cleared. Now, humbly, we ask that you bring the sunshine and make a Warhammer Fantasy Battle campaign. For months, we fantasy fans have languished in the glorious glare of the 40K campaigns, reimagining Commissar Khrushchev as a devout warrior priest leading the Sons of Sigmar. Seen in Korax and Zarok, the potential of them as warlords of chaos instead of space marines, of Kanum leading the undead legions of the Tomb Kings instead of the Necrons. So we entreat you again, make a Warhammer Fantasy Battle narrative campaign. I definitely agree. And you will, one day, Crown Blade, get your narrative campaign. I just don't know when. Also, will we ever get to see you play some N3, so Infinity? I imagine yes, just not in the near future. Ash is really taking the lead on that, and he's planning on starting an Infinity League and really get a lot more of those churned out. You should start to see a lot more Infinity Battle Reports going out, hopefully starting next week. And yeah, but it's something I've stepped away from a little bit just because I've been so busy with all the 40K stuff that I've been doing, and just need to keep focusing on that. Kellingsgria. Hello, Matt. You mentioned that in the future you'd be willing, blah, 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 sorry. You'd be willing to hire someone for the purpose of writing the lore of your narrative campaigns, as you said yourself that you aren't the most imaginative. Yeah, it's partly that, and it's partly also just because of time, and it would just be nice to have somebody else do it. Maybe laziness, but it's more time than laziness. It does take a lot of time for me to sit down and do it. So I'd love to be able to sit down and talk with a writer. Like the dream kind of thing would be sit down and be able to bounce ideas off of a writer, come up with a good concept for it, get really excited about it, and then leave them to do the writing, and then I get the writing back, I go through it, and then I am more like an editor kind of thing where I say, okay, I want this changed, this changed, this changed. And so it's still like, it's more like I'm in a director role than in a director, producer, writer, filmer, all that kind of stuff, pretty much everything except the video editing. And so that would be a lot of fun, because then I get to have the fun in creating the stories, but having somebody else kind of fill in all those blanks. And I think they could have a lot better quality too. I think you can utilize your large fan base to your advantage. This hobby is full of very creative writers who spend hours writing their lores and even doing narrative campaigns of their own. I agree. Quite recently, actually, my friends and I did a narrative campaign very similar to the ones you do. So to save your time of writing narrative campaigns, would you be willing to accept narrative campaigns written by your fans? See, this is where it gets a little tough, because part of the thing that I love the most about doing narrative campaigns is coming up with the story. And so I wouldn't want to hand that off. Now, occasionally, and it's been rare, somebody's given me an idea for a narrative campaign that when I hear it, it's just like, yes, I've got to do that. For example, the idea of the Tyranid thing that we talked about, where the cancerous thing, I've totally taken that and I'm running with it, and we're actually preparing to do one. You won't see it for months because I'm actually working on creating a new army and new terrain and all that. So there'll be other narrative campaigns in between that one and this one. But I love the idea so much that I'm going forward with it. But honestly, most of the time when people give me ideas, it doesn't excite me because it's not my idea. I love the idea concept of the creation of the narrative campaigns. And so for somebody else to come and say, here's a narrative campaign for you to do, I won't be motivated to do it. And since we don't do so few of them, because they're only like one coming out every couple months, I am able to I can be picky on the story because there is 1,001 ways that I could do it. All these awesome, really cool stories that the 40K universe would allow for, but I can only do a handful of them. And so I can cherry pick and be like, this is what I want to do. So having them pre-written, and also the way a narrative campaign is created, they are not pre-written at all. And so there needs to be a lot of interaction between me and whoever's doing the writing, because these things are created as the campaign progresses. We create a setting at the beginning, we create our first 2 missions, we play them, and I don't try to figure out what's going to happen next. We actually it's more in tune of a role-playing group where I am the GM, where I come and give them a setting, but a really good GM is not going to like lay out exactly what happens for the whole thing. They're going to have this idea for a story, but then they're going to allow what the players do to really contribute to how that story progresses. And that gives the players the feeling that they're part of the story creating. And that's exactly like for Leland and I, he's been a huge part of the story making. Like we sit down and we talk about it, we figure out what the mission should be, where it should direct. I'm definitely the director of it, and that basically I have final say, and that and then I'm more looking for ideas from him, and then I take them and turn them into how I want to do it. But he's definitely a huge part of that creation. And so having a writer who's not in the office would be hard. Now, I've had some people email me, and I'm willing to try out the idea of it, but I can see that it'll be difficult, because I need to have a conversation face to face with them, and I need to be able to be on the fly and be able to sit down and be like, okay, here's what I'm thinking, and kind of come up with that concept. So pre-written narrative campaigns definitely wouldn't work, because that's a pre-written scripted story, and we don't do that way. I actually don't know. We still haven't done. We filmed mission 6A for Rise of the Blood Reaver. We filmed that yesterday, and then Leland's going on. We're not going to film the next one for another couple weeks. Let's just put it that way. But I don't know who's going to win. I don't. I know what's happened so far, but I don't know the ending, because we allow the battle reports to really help forge the narrative. A lot of fans, me included, would love to submit the campaigns we have written, and we would love to see our campaigns done by Mini Wargaming. Yeah. Even if I submit the campaign that my friends and I did, and you don't like the premise, even taking a small portion or idea from my campaign would really mean a lot. And that's, I can take definitely portions of stuff. It's just that, honestly, I don't have time. I already get too many emails of people saying, hey, here's a narrative campaign idea. I have written out this 10-page thing, and I feel horrible because I'm like, I don't have time to read through all these. So I have to reply saying, sorry, just don't have time to keep up with all these emails of people posting campaign ideas. And so it's just that wouldn't work. I need a talented writer who knows the 40K fluff really well, who preferably is somebody who would work in the office and do the writing for that stuff. They could also do other things too. They could also be a video producer, because I don't think we'd be able to employ a full-time writer. I don't think so, at least. And it's not something we're looking for right now, because it's just, like I said, it's something I can still do. Zaku Kai. Greetings and salutations, Matt. Question. I know in the past you have said you don't like mechanized army lists, but would you still be willing to fight at someone who came in with one? Of course. Things like that, like if you're going to go full mechanized, that's on the list of tell your opponent kind of stuff. Like if you're going to bring flyers or super heavies, you usually tell your opponent beforehand. I ask this because I play Imperial Guard and I have a very mechanized list, not because I play to win, but because ever since I was a child, I loved watching old black and white videos from World War II. Tank battles on the History Channel, from World War II, tank battles on the History Channel. I love tanks. I always have and always will, and that is why I play Guard. Yeah, I would definitely accept that. P.S. Tell Ash he's doing an awesome job. His old World War videos always make me laugh. Zaku Kai. He's not in right now, but I'll tell him. I'll definitely tell him that. Mad Fool. Hi, Matt, and others at Mini Wargaming. Just a thought. Each and every bat rep sees you guys pitching the same lines. Granted, you put some flair into each one, bravo, over and over again about joining the Mini Wargaming Vault, which I totally get. It's necessary for recruiting. But maybe instead of having it be part of the bat rep video, you have it pop up for non-Vault members, kind of like how ads automatically play on YouTube. That way you could record a few good pitches and have it play only when people who aren't signed up on the website as Vault members watch them. That's unfortunately impossible to do because we put our videos on YouTube. There's no way for us to know when you're watching a video on YouTube if you are a Vault member or not. If you're watching them on our website, maybe, but that assumes you're logged in and that we could tell. So there's no feasible way for us to really be sure whether you are or are not a Vault member. I'm not sure how far-fetched this is. I'm no computer expert. I'm just trying to save you having to say these things in every video, and the Vault members who realize what a killer deal the Vault is from having to listen to every video. You guys are fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, it's important that that message goes out every video. Now I see that you're saying that it would anyways, but yeah, it's just something that has to. It's just such an integral part of our business that the Vault has to be pitched left, right, and center pretty much at every video because it is what makes us our money. The YouTube advertising, I would let me do the calculation really quick. YouTube advertising pays the equivalent of pretty much one full-time employee. One of our video producers, I'd say. That covers the cost of one of them. And we've got Chris, Ash, Steve, now Leland, and then we've got Justin, of course, working full-time, and then there's myself, and there's Dave. 7 people, all full-time, and so 40 hours a week. And then we've got all of our other expenses, a lot of other expenses, the building that we're leasing, all of our equipment and everything else. Actually, I could say that the YouTube revenue covers pretty much our lease. It allows us to stay where we are in this building, and that's about it. So, and that's with how many views we get. There's no way really for us to optimize that much further and get more. So the YouTube advertising is nice. It's like, yeah, sure, why not get that money? That is nice. But by all means, it provides such a small percentage. I'd say 5 to 10% at most of our revenue comes from YouTube. Might even be less. And so advertising just isn't a viable thing. And so the Vault is such a pivotal part, providing the majority, the vast majority of our revenue and profits and our ability to operate, that it has to be pushed. It has to be kind of in your face all the time. It has to be obvious. And because we're now very proud of it, whereas years ago we were like, oh, it's not as good as we'd like it, so maybe we didn't talk about it as much, but now we're proud of it. It's awesome. I honestly think if you like Mini Wargaming's videos, then the Vault, you will definitely like the Vault, because it's more of our stuff. And then even some more than that, because they have like the daily quick tips from Chris. And so, and the cost is so inexpensive. You get a yearly bronze membership, it's $35.88, I think it is, Canadian. If you're American, that's like almost just $30 a year. And so that's less than $3 a month, basically. And so we keep putting it out there. And yeah, some people are going to be tired of hearing it. The people who definitely don't want a Vault membership are like, all right, stop trying to pitch me the Vault. And the people who already have the Vault membership might be like, okay, I'm already a Vault member. But those people can just turn off the battle report at that point, because it is at the end. So, and unfortunately, because we have no way to know if somebody was watching, if we did have a way to know, we could do much more targeted advertising, and that would be awesome. But we don't. So, unfortunately, that's the way we got to do it. And it is working. It's actually working quite well. Lily Pad Jumper. Hey, Matt, love the site and all the work that you all put into it. Thank you. Have a comment or a suggestion about the sit and talk, and then a couple of short questions. An idea I have on your sit and talk is maybe make it 2 hours. The first hour available to all and non-Vault members, question answered. Second hour, Vault members only, and only their questions answered. That's a good idea. I know like Beasts of War does their weekly weekender, and they have what's called the extra pounds, or the extra large size. I can't remember what it is. And that is for their backstage, which is the same idea as the Vault, where it's a premium content site. And they do that. And they put a lot of effort into those weekenders, because it's a news and discussion show. But this, because it's just me doing it. Now you might say, we'll bring in other people, but just with the way it works right now, it's just me doing this. An hour is actually, after an hour, I'm like, whew, that was a workout to sit here for an hour and talk that long just by myself. Now I could then be like, maybe I'll do 45 minutes and 15, or an hour and 15, or whatever. So that's not a bad, that's a good suggestion. I really like the suggestion. It's just 2 hours would be too much. So maybe even if it was just an extra 20 minutes where I answered just Vault, and that's like the extra sit and talk portion. So that could be a way I'd do it. It does increase. Maybe I drop the hour down to like 45 minutes, and then the last 15 minutes is Vault. Something like that. And of course people are gonna be like, no, don't make it less than an hour. I'm not a Vault member. I want to see the whole hour. Just like people who said, no, don't make it every other week, because then I don't get to see it every other week. And it's like, well, I understand why that would be disappointing, but at the same time, if it pushes more people to be Vault members, then it's worth it from our end. But that's a good idea. I didn't even think of that. Even though I've seen the Beasts of War do it, it never occurred to me to include something similar for this show. So good idea. You seem to do that with your narratives, so it seems fair to me to do it that way. Which, speaking of narratives, brings me to my first question. Can you have a section on the site to upload, download narratives with rules and fluff and such that we can play ourselves? I would love to play your narratives here, but want the rules and such. We don't actually have formalized rules for our narratives. Like if I actually showed you how little I have written for the missions, for the battle reports themselves, like they're very loose. It's very, very quick. The actual fluff I write out, and so that could be there, but we don't have a really formalized document that's like, this is the mission. Because I don't want that, to be honest. It's more, like I said, it's more like a GM with a role-playing group, and so the mission is more fluffy and less like there's been some missions in Rise of the Blood Reaver that you'll see where you'll notice, if you pay attention, that at the beginning I say what the objective is, but there aren't actually any objectives on the table. And there's not First Blood, Slay the Warlord, Linebreaker. There are plenty that have those kind of things. But there's some of them where it's just like, this is the objective, so-and-so has to achieve this. And then we just play. And when the game ends, you could declare a winner, but really it's just the story's continued. And so it's hard to put that into a mission with a win-lose scenario. See, when you have written out narrative campaigns, such as a lot of the supplements, the Shield of Baal supplements, that, or the Stormclaw stuff that Games Workshop has put out, or a lot of the Imperial Armor books, it's a campaign and they have all the different scenarios. It's more like a historical reenactment of the campaign, where you're like, I'm playing the mission where these guys played, we'll see what happens with us doing it. And they might even have a structure where it's like, if so-and-so wins this mission, then the next mission they get this bonus. Or you have like this tree where if Team A wins, you play this mission next. If Team B wins, you play this next mission. And it kind of has this tree structure where it then splits off and it tells you what to play. And those are all fine for writing supplements, but for our narrative campaigns, that's not the way they work. They are an evolving story that we create as we go along. It's more akin to making a movie than making a narrative campaign that others would play. And so if you watch let's say you played The Hobbit, the Hobbit game, the miniatures game. So you've just watched the Hobbit movie, and then you go to the store and you buy all the miniatures from that movie, and then you recreate all the different things that happen in the movie. See, that would be akin to buying the narrative campaign books from Games Workshop and playing those, or me trying to write out the scenarios that we do, and then you play them. Whereas what we're doing is more making the movie to begin with. We're more like, let's develop the story. Now, we let a lot of chance kind of determine how the story evolves, which can be both awesome and aggravating for me, watching the dice determine certain things happening that I didn't want to happen. But they often create really cool situations that I would never have created on my own or thought to create. And so it's this combination of GMing a gaming group, although it's just two of us, and making a movie-ish kind of thing where you're trying to write the story, but you let the story write itself, not in this figurative sense like the sculpture is already in the rock, we just have to remove the rock that's not part of the sculpture. Not in that sense of letting it write itself, because that still requires a ton of the skill of the sculptor to actually know what to cut out. And it's more like it writes itself in the sense that you roll dice and so dies, or so-and-so does this awesome thing, and you need to make the story more about them and less about the person you thought you were making a story about because they died off early or they didn't do anything fantastic enough to really be for anybody to care about them. Like you think of Khrushchev, Commissar Khrushchev is a perfect example of that. Like he was just a commissar, like he was nothing special. He just was a commissar in a unit, and they did something cool and they're like, okay, let's give him a name because he did something cool. And then he just continued to do cool things for the entire campaign, and by the end we had the legendary Commissar Khrushchev, who now uses Yarek's rules because of how awesome he is, and he even has a custom model made. Khnum was the same way in the Fate of Fayoum. He was just a secondary character, an overlord that I had Steve name really quickly because we needed a name for the overlord who was going to lead the assault on that hive ship. And then he did something so fantastically awesome that we had to then incorporate him into the story, and then he just kept being awesome, and he became the legendary Pharaon Overlord Khnum. And those kind of things I don't plan for, and so it's hard to write that out, the aftermath or whatever. So really, the missions are loose, and they have some objectives, but a lot of times it's just let's play the game and then see what happened and continue the story based on that. And that's how we create our narrative campaigns. So it's a very organic process that doesn't lend itself well to documented missions and all of that. That doesn't mean that we couldn't document the mission afterwards, but then it would just be like a historical thing where it's like, well, now you can play the same mission, but what if it doesn't work out the same way? They're not typically balanced. They don't typically have, like, what happens if it doesn't work that way? Well, then the mission wouldn't continue to the next mission. It just wouldn't make sense for the story to continue. So yeah. So it's tough. It's tough. Second question. So I am a woman who plays this game. I have yet to meet another. Do you know of other female 40K players out there? Or am I truly a rare gift to my husband? Well, you are not common. I think when I look at our viewership, it's around 6 to 8% of our viewership is female. Now, there's more of you out there. Obviously, there's even some YouTube personalities out there who are, like, I think a Wargamer Girl, obviously, who is a woman. There are others out there. I don't know if we've ever featured one in a battle report here. I don't think we have. Like, we've had girlfriends come with their boyfriends, and wives come with their husbands, and mothers come with their sons. But I don't think we've ever actually featured a woman, and that's just, maybe it's because it's just all men here, and so that's just who feels comfortable coming in. That's always a big question of this industry, or any industry for that matter. Some industries will have one gender dominant over another gender. Not that way. I mean, like, there's more of that gender than the other gender, and you typically have that happen just because of cultural things or whatever it ends up being. So but you are a rare gift to your husband. My wife is similar. She's not into wargaming, but she was big into role playing, and that was always awesome. We did role playing games together. But it took us a few years to have our first kid, not by choice. But in those few years, we were able to play lots of board games, and we played role playing games, and we had a role playing group, and we had a lot of fun together. So I'd say you are not unique, but you are uncommon, which is a good thing in this case. You said your wife doesn't play. What about others that work there? Just feel ultra rare here. Don't think anybody else here in the office plays. No, nobody else here in the office has a wife or girlfriend who plays wargaming. But I do know that other wives or girlfriends in here are into other things like role-playing games. P.S. I was the one who posted, husband thinks like Wopar. Was supposed to be, husband thinks they sound like Wopar. You know from War Games? Great movie. I don't. I don't actually know who Wopar is from War Games. Which makes the reference even funnier. Themocrite. Hey there, Matt. I recently started my own miniature painting business part-time after a lot of friends were asking me to paint miniatures for them. I was wondering if you had any business tips on how to promote and grow a business, seeing as mini wargaming is such a success. Well, I can talk specifically of how to promote and grow a miniature painting business, and that depends what your goals are. Are you planning on just being a one-man painting operation forever, or do you want to become like a Awakened Realms or Blue Table Painting, where you employ a lot of painters? Those are two very different things. In fact, most businesses end up being one of those two. You have the store owners who, after 30 years of being in business and even being successful, are still working in the store as the manager or even as a cashier, because it's maybe just a handful of people, and they love that. That's what they want. They just want to be in the front line, in the trenches with the people. And then you have other business people who prefer to start it that way, but want to grow in such a way that they can take more and more and more of a managerial position and manage the business that's growing. Those are two different types of entrepreneurs. So you have the ones who are entrepreneurs for the sake of being entrepreneurs, meaning that they like the idea of growing businesses. That's me. I love the idea of growing businesses. And then you have the entrepreneurs who love the thing that their business is about so much that they always want to be hands-on. And so, which one are you? If you're a one-man painting operation, your business can grow very differently because you don't incur a lot of the costs that other businesses, small businesses or larger businesses, will incur, because you can work from your home. You have next to no overhead. You have no employees, or maybe one employee who deals with your customer support. That's always a good idea. You can also charge more, because supply and demand. Supply and demand is a very simple thing. When there is more demand, you can charge more. When there is more supply, you have to charge less. Well, your supply is always the same. And so as the demand for your services increase, your prices can go up. Because if you think about it, if you have all of a sudden 1,000 people wanting commissions from you, but you can only handle 10, and let's say your price is X dollars, and at that X dollar price range, all 1,000 people want you, well, you're only going to get 10 of them anyways. So if you raise your prices, and then all of a sudden that 1,000 becomes only 500 are interested in your services, well, you can still only handle 10. So now you're going to make more money. And then if you raise your prices even more, and out of that 500, now only 100 are interested in your services, well, you can still only take 10, so you're making even more money from those 10. So as a single man operation, you can have higher prices than a multi-man operation, because, well, in a multi-man operation, you want to have more competitive pricing, because you want to be able to keep growing your business, and you multiply that over a larger net, and so that becomes more money for you. And so a single painting, so if you stay by, so it sounds like you might think, well, why would I ever want to have multiple people working for me? It's because overall, if you are one person and you're able to raise your prices so much that you're making, say, $30 or $40 an hour on average, which would be fantastic. But if you were a business owner of 30 painters, and for each painter you make $4 an hour, well, all of a sudden that 30 times that by 30, and you're able to make $120 per hour. You're making less per painter, way less. It goes from $30 or $40 to only $3, but you're multiplying that over a ton of people, and you're making more money. So the question is, which one sounds more appealing to you? Because also with that $120 an hour becomes more stress of dealing with that many employees and turnover and operating costs, more marketing, more customer problems, because the more things you do, then the more chances of having not, you know, there's pros and cons to both. Staying small has its pros, growing big has its pros. They both have their cons as well. So if you're just staying small, then build up your customer base, and if you're finding that you're always getting booked way too far in advance, raise your prices. Raise your prices until you're only getting booked enough in advance, and you're able to keep that way. And you might feel bad about those prices at first, but that's when people want a specific artist, they will pay a premium price for that. So make sure you're charging enough, because it costs you a lot of money to acquire or it costs you a lot of time to acquire your customers. So that's the big thing right there. Obviously, just quality work, word of mouth will be a big thing. How you promote yourself, there's a lot of ways to do that. Some companies have had a lot of success in having a YouTube channel where they just showcase the work that they're doing. That's a good way to give people something to see and to know that you're doing this. Banner advertising, stuff like that doesn't work as well. So I would say using social media is a big one. Having a Facebook page for your business, having a YouTube channel for your business, where you invest in a high quality camera for taking good pictures and good videos. Make sure for miniature business to thrive, they need to do well for painting their miniatures. They don't have to be the best price, especially if you're a one-man operation. This is a premium service in a premium industry. Like, people are already paying a lot of money for their miniatures, which might make you think, well, they don't have a lot of money left to buy hire painters. It's actually the opposite, because it attracts the kind of people who will spend a lot of money. All of a sudden they're invested more, so they'll spend even more money. Now, not everybody, obviously, not everybody will get a miniature painter, but you're not trying to get everybody, you're just trying to get a piece of that market and be able to make money off of them. So make sure you have good turnaround times, make sure you have good communication, make sure you have a good camera and are good at taking, very good, extremely good at taking good pictures of miniatures, because otherwise you can have a good paint job and it looks bad, or you can have a bad paint job and it looks good, and then they get it and they're like, that is not what it looked like. So you have to get very good at that. And he said, be good at communication, good at taking pictures, and obviously good at painting miniatures. And then as you build your client base, you can keep increasing your prices more and more and more until you get to that sweet spot where you're only booking a couple months in advance. Because remember, the more you're booking ahead, the longer people have to wait, and the less likely they're going to use you because they have to wait too long. Everybody wants a quick turnaround time. And so yeah, you want to work, if you're going to stay small, you want to work with less people and make more money. You don't want to try to get tons and tons and tons of quotes. You want to set yourself up as somebody who only works with this size armies or this types of models and charging this much, and allow you to make more money that way. There is my advice right there. Oplu, hey Matt, I love what you guys do, and I'm waiting on my next paycheck to subscribe to the vault. I have a couple questions, and thank you, by the way. First, just out of curiosity, do all the people who work for Mini Wargaming have the same religious views? Definitely not. I'm not going to go through what I think everybody's religious views are, because that's really not any of my business to share on the show. But I can say we definitely don't. Dave and I are both Latter-day Saints or Mormons or whatever you want to call it, but nobody else in the office is. Obviously, if you don't, you get along fine, but it was just an interesting thought I had that sort of tied into my second question. How do you decide that you're going to hire someone? I'm involved enough in the hobby that I'm looking to work at a store, and right now I'm considering a move to Calgary for a shop. You can probably guess which one. But you guys seem to have a great thing going. I'd like to know what your hiring practices are. Thanks a lot. Keep on keeping on, Will. Well, you have to be at least 6 feet tall, and you have to be able to grow a beard. Everybody except me. That seems to be the qualifications it takes to come work here, because everybody here is tall and grows a beard. But in all seriousness, how do I decide that we're going to hire someone? It's actually really hard to find somebody that fits all the qualifications of what we're looking for. And also because we're in Welland, which is not a very big city, so it doesn't have a lot of gamers around here for us to pick through. Basically, what we're looking for is somebody who knows the game, is passionate about the game, and is good on camera. That's really it. You don't have to have many technical skills. You don't have to really know how to operate a video camera. Those things we can teach. Teaching personality and teaching enthusiasm for the game, that's hard. In fact, it's impossible. And so most of the people that we've hired, Ash, Leland, and Steve, have all been hired because they've come in for battle reports beforehand without the intent of being hired. Not any of those three came in to do battle reports because they wanted to be hired. They came in because they wanted to be in them. So that's a big indication right there. If they're willing to come in for battle reports, that shows a certain type of person that we'd be looking for. Steve was the first person we hired that way. Even back looking at Owen and Jay, both of them had come in for battle reports before. I think Chris is the only person who works here who does videos, who we didn't hire based on having known him face to face and him coming in. I guess he had come into, even he had come into an Apocalypticon. So we actually knew him that way. So I guess I can't really say that we've ever hired anybody to do videos for us who has not at least appeared in videos with us before. So I'd say Chris is the one that had the least amount of exposure because it was only at one event. So yeah, so I'd say that's a big part. Now that could be hard for somebody who's far away, who would be willing to move to work for us, because really we don't know how a person's going to work out until we get them on camera. People are totally different in person and on camera. They just change until they get comfortable enough, and then they can be themselves on camera. But most people have a hard time being themselves on camera. And so getting them in, like Steve was a great example. We did the Fate of Fayum narrative campaign, and by the end of it, I'm like, we got to hire this guy. It was just awesome. He was just the way he worked out. Same thing with Leland. Ash, he came in for some Infinity Battle reports, and it was just a lot of fun to play against. I'm like, oh, this guy would be great. I'm always talent scouting. I even tell people that sometimes too. I'm like, you know, if we were to ask you, like if we were looking to hire, would you be interested in working here? I ask that question usually months in advance of hiring somebody, because I'm always looking for more talent that way. Because it is a bit of a unique skill set that puts everything together into what we look for this job. I'm almost out of time. This is about 12 o'clock. I know it's only at 50-something minutes, but have a little less time today. I'll do a couple more questions. Dominic Steele. Hi, Matt. I was just wondering what you consider to be a competitive Astra Militarum list. Oh, wow. Lots of Astra Militarum questions today. I already talked about that, so I'm going to skip that question. Pai, greetings from Denmark. Hey, Matt. Hey, Pai. 1, I was wondering if you know of another YouTuber, Ace Face, as he's doing a lot with Tyrannus. I actually don't. 2, a couple of friends and I are talking about opening an RPG business here in Denmark. It would include Warhammer, LARP, pen and paper, gaming rooms. So you're talking about a store then. I was wondering if you could give a piece of advice. Would you include Games Workshop into your product range, or stay away and take alternative companies? Well, as much as people love to hate Games Workshop, they're still one of the most popular manufacturers of miniatures out there. So not including them would be like not including Apple products in your electronics store because you have something against Apple. Like it's a bad business move. I can't give you a lot of advice about running a store because we've never really done one successfully. We had a store for a few years, but it was only able to keep running because we had the online portion, and that's not even open anymore. So I always chuckle a little bit, so chuckle, when somebody asks me for advice on a store because ours shut down. So I'm not sure if I'm the best person to ask for advice. There's 2 things I'll tell you though. 1, make sure you have good stock. 2, run lots of events. Keep people playing. There's a million other things that you know, Ash would probably be the better person to talk to about that because he worked for Games Workshop for so long and he ran stores and managed and hired a lot, that he'd probably have a better idea of what makes a good store. There's my phone ringing. I gotta turn it off. There we go. 1 more question. 3, do you have a great story to share about a time you were so drunk you could hardly walk? Well, I don't drink. Part of our tenets in my religion is that we do not drink or smoke. And so I've actually never drunk in my entire life. So, no, I don't have a story about when I was so drunk I could hardly walk. I could tell you stories about when I'm so tired or so sick or whatever, but those are not nearly as interesting. Okay, let's do 1 more. The Chaos Inside. Matt, 3rd time's a charm, I hope. Hope this message finds you and your family and your staff well. Thank you. I know that you discussed about designing armies that could potentially be used in competition. Would you consider doing an internal competition, mini wargaming staff only, and make a Vault member only series? I know that the majority of the mini wargaming team has at least one 40k army. I think it would be an awesome Vault series, just a thought. That's something that could happen in the future, who knows. Things like that will have to be done as special features just because of everybody's very busy making their shows and their battle reports, and so that costs us a lot of time and money for the company to be able to bring everybody together like that. But it's also something that people would really like to see, so it makes sense to do it for special occasions. For example, at Christmas, we get a lot of viewers, and so doing something during the Christmas holidays always makes sense to make it special. Thank you very much for all your questions, and thank you for watching the Sit and Talk. Stay tuned for next week's Sit and Talk, and leave your questions and comments below. Thumb up the questions that you like so that I can answer the ones that people want me to answer the most. And happy wargaming.